like all people, I've struggled with mental health challenges over the years. And I've had a number of the same issues that you alluded to. I've been fortunate and I've not fallen into the addiction path, which is easy to do. But I have had anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation and gone to some very dark places. And I think that's not uncommon for high achievers and not uncommon for people who are driven. That goes from therapists to real estate
Mhm.
agents to business leaders or athletes, all the rest of it. The mental health element, which is a big part of the reason why I'm happy to be on the show today. The mental health is a crucial part of it, and that of everyone's success and acceptance to talk about these very sensitive matters.
Okay, welcome to the Mental Health Show with Robert Grigore. I am your host, Robert Grigore. If you are new to the show is about demystifying mental health and bringing a voice to different issues regarding mental health, to break some myths out there, to change some minds, and just really continue the conversation in a way that hopefully helps you, the audience member, to save maybe some time, some money, or some unnecessary pain and suffering, and just really contribute to this amazing thing that we have called life, and be a great source for you to get some good information. So I'm always joined when I do these interviews with incredible people, and today is no different. I have, dare I say, real estate royalty with me. I'm sure you've heard
Yeah, how
that
long have you been
before.
saving that one? Yeah,
About
jeez.
24 hours.
Okay, all right. Yeah,
Okay, I'm sure you've heard that before. Hey,
yeah,
just,
every once in a while. Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, the reason is my guest today is Jeff King, and he's an incredible individual that I've had the pleasure of convincing to be on the show with me here. And his accomplishments is extremely long, so I'm going to read this out here.
Hmm.
So Jeff King. He's the CEO of Greater Vancouver Realtors right now, which is a very old company. We'll probably talk about that in a little bit later, starting in 1919, if I have my
Correct.
numbers correct.
Yeah.
So that's really an amazing segue that we'll get into probably. But Jeff's here. Okay, so in 2024, he was named top 5 influential figures shaping the future by Magnate Magazine or Magnate in Magazine. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing
I
that
think
right.
it's Magnet, but yeah,
Magnet.
yeah.
Okay. Also in 2024, he was the CEO of the Year. CEO Views. That's incredible. So congratulations to both of those.
Thanks.
2023 top 20 dynamic CEOs by Canada by the CEO publication. 2023 most influential leaders in real estate by Tycoon Magazine. 2021 CEO of the Year by Canada by M&A Today. 2020 the same honor.
Hmm.
2019 the same honor. 2019 the same honor by a different company, Global by Lawyer International. I mean, these are a lot of people are agreeing that you're doing very well in the world. 2016 Deal of the Year Canada by M&A Today. I have here times 2.
Yep, yep,
Pretty.
that, that's true. Yeah, yeah, we won deal of the year. It wasn't just me; it was the team I was a part of, but for 2 different deals that I'll be happy to talk about.
Spoken like a true leader. It is always about the team. I love
Oh,
that.
thanks.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jeff. Also, member in Innovators Alliance, McKay CEO Forum, Platinum Record Award winner. I'm going to dive
Hmm.
into that probably a little bit. So,
It's right behind me. Yeah.
so Jeff, you've got quite an illustrious career already. You've come from I've gathered from the tech industry, the music industry, and now real estate. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Robert. It is great to be here. I appreciate it a great deal. Um, but yeah, you're right. My career's kind of in 3 chunks. The first piece was in financial services and in insurance and reinsurance, specializing mostly in major exposure areas like transport trucks and aviation. And then I spent 20 years in the music business and watched that industry be disrupted, and some of them survived and did quite well, including the one I worked for, and others did not. And then in 2021, I made the move into organized real estate and
Wow.
took on the role of CEO of what was then called the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver. but is now called, as you correctly pointed out, Greater Vancouver Realtors.
Amazing. What inspired you to make that switch for you into real estate?
Um, so I did something that most people do not do in their 50s. I changed industries and changed cities I lived in. So I was based in Toronto my whole career.
Hmm.
I had accomplished a lot. Had been with SOCAN, Canada's largest music organization,
Hmm.
for a couple of decades. Uh, they had acquired some U.S. Subsidiaries, and at the beginning of COVID, began to look at different ways to handle their business, spun those off, and then I thought, well, am I going to spend the last part of my career just sort of doing what I was doing before, or is this an opportunity? And I put the word out, and ended up here. And there's more similarities than you would think, right? So one deals with intellectual property, the other one deals with real property,
Uh-huh.
but a lot of it's contractually based. I think music has gone through its disruption and it generally is doing well. There's still some challenges. Whereas I think real estate, the disruption is just starting. Real estate
Mm.
and is about a generation behind other industries that have gone through the disruption. Not just internet or Web 2.0, but even the stuff that's happening now with neo banking and the like is starting to move into the real estate space. So I saw it as a huge opportunity to really have a positive impact on how an industry responds to the disruptors.
I love that. I think that's terrific. It takes a lot of courage to shift industries, to shift country, one side of the country essentially to the other. I did make that move myself in 2010,
Mm,
as we talked about in the pre-interview here. And I there's a lot of overlaps. I'm really excited to talk about all this stuff. I've got so in my role as a clinical counselor and specializing in EMDR and trauma therapy, I've worked with a lot of industry professionals in various different fields, and some of them actually being in the music industry,
mm.
realtors as well, music executives. One of my colleagues of mine is actually the president of a major music organization in Canada.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
it's really interesting. Maybe we'll have a chat about that in the future too.
Hmm.
But the reason why I really pulled you into invited you to be on the show is to talk about the intersection between mental health and real estate. And I know
Hmm.
there's a couple of different angles we could probably go with this, from the cost, average cost per household, to a lot of different angles. I was actually just recently on a podcast as a guest for one of my friends who, the podcast is called Bamboo Podcast. I'll put a link here for you to
Mm.
check that out in the recording. But it was really interesting. So we talked a lot about mental health, and so I was curious from your perspective, what have you seen as an introduction here around mental health and real estate? What have you seen as the sort of the challenges that happen from a mental health perspective?
Well, it's as with everything to do with mental health. There's multi dimensions to it, right? And a lot of it's rooted in childhood and development and early adult experiences, and there's a lot of complexity there. But when you get right to the sort of specifics of the real estate, there's a couple different dimensions. One is a person buying or selling their home.
Yep.
Some people are very attached to their homes, and it's almost part of their personality, and other people are not. Um,
Yes.
they just sort of see it as either an instrument, a place to live, or sometimes for some folks it's an event.
Hmm.
But where I think there's an interesting string we can pull, Robert, is around the role of the realtor.
Yes.
And the realtor is, in my view, is more than an advisor, but almost like a Sherpa, helping guide people through their journey to make their acquisition or sell their house or sell their business and different things like that, or acquire a new one. And I think it can be a very lonely existence, right? It's there's a combination of you eat what you kill, which adds
Hmm.
pressure to it for a lot of folks. Not everyone's built for that,
Yep.
and that feast or famine element sometimes can create different behaviors that are hard on folks.
Yes.
Mostly for some, it's not built. Not everyone's built for it. And it takes a certain degree of drive and focus and energy. And at the end of it all, we're still talking about people, right?
Yeah.
And so people will react to different situations in different ways. And I think it's important for the real estate agent, the realtor, to be able to realize that and sort of try to accommodate it and realize that they're on this journey with these people, and should not be. It's not a personal thing in of itself with the relationship, but it can feel very personal when the other side, so to speak, gives you a hard time, or when somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, and or they're not professional. That can be a challenge. And I think I in the my short time in this role is about 3.5 years. I've probably met 1,500, maybe 1,600 real estate agents, and there's a couple of things they have in common. Number one, they're all people. Number two, they tend to have very high EQ, emotional intelligence, uh, very good at connecting with people. But
Yes.
people with high EQ also take on the burden often.
Yes.
They'll feel the emotional attachment and they'll take things to heart very deeply. And I think that's a big part of the emotional drive. There's another set
Hmm.
within organized real estate, and that's like the managing broker who takes on an enormous burden of being responsible for a lot of folks with a lot of stress and a lot of responsibility and, in fact, liability. And I think that can also be a challenging role. I've been
Yes.
fortunate to meet a number of really impressive managing brokers, but I often wonder about their ability to handle all this stuff. I'm amazed by it.
There is a lot of emotional intelligence that's necessary for being successful, I think, as a realtor. I think some people out there might imagine that that the standard life for a realtor is something that you see on reality TV. You know, got the Rolls Royce or something, and they're selling
Yeah.
$10 million homes. And I'm sure that's the case for some, but for probably the by far the most, it's probably much different. And um, when and I think that as a person that's showing a home, for example, as you're walking through, it's in the realtor's best interest to probably be very perceptive as to what seems to be going over well with the client, what do they not like, and being very tuned into the nuances. They have to be quite attuned here. And for a
Mhm.
lot of people, buying or selling their home is most likely one of the biggest purchases that they're ever going to make, or the
Mhm.
biggest sales that they're ever going to make. So they're dealing with a lot of money. It could be their life savings. It could be in today's, I'm guessing, you correct me if I'm wrong, but today's economy is probably more like intergenerational, wealth is being transferred now more than ever because it's becoming more expensive. So you've got a whole, like several human beings involved here, whole lineages of people that might be on the line for a sale. That's a lot of pressure.
No, absolutely, and to be honest, a lot of times people just look at the raw dollar on it, but there's also the financial impact that goes on for a decade or so.
Hmm.
Depending on a few variables, the average person or family moves every 7 to 12 years. It varies by geography a bit and such, but people will move a few times over their adult lifespan, and if you make poor decisions, it can have a very negative impact. Or if you make some good decisions or have good advice, it can be an incredibly positive experience, both
Hmm.
emotionally and financially for you and your family. But
Yes.
you're right. There's a number of folks involved in these elements, including the bank of mom and dad, and other factors that come into play.
Yes. So knowing that this show is about mental health, I
Hmm.
want to kind of dive into some of the actual mental health concerns that might happen, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so you don't have to
Right.
answer this. If you don't want to, but if you don't mind sharing your own experiences with mental health, I mean,
Mm.
I'll go first. Addictions, whole bunch of different kinds, mental health, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation at one point in time in my life, abusive relationships. I kind of been through a lot of different things.
Hmm.
I don't You don't have to share all of the details, but I think it'd be really good to know that you're a human being. You've been through some things, you've seen some things, and or it could be a friend of yours or somebody that you know of. Just whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Okay. No, I appreciate it, and I appreciate that I'm in a safe place
Yeah, yeah, and
to
it's not a
talk about
therapy
these.
session though. It's not a therapy session. Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to bill out of this, right? Okay.
No,
Okay.
no.
All right. um,
Am I going to get a bill out of this?
Yeah, well, we'll make sure there's the same amount, and we'll help each other.
Okay.
I like to think, like all people, I've struggled with mental health challenges over the years, and I've had a number of the same issues that you alluded to. I've been fortunate, and I've not fallen into the addiction path, which is easy to do. but I have had anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation,
Mm-hmm.
and gone to some very dark places. And to me, this is overly simplistic, and I'm not the professional in this space, but depression is often related to me about um, the past, and anxieties about the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of find that I struggle with both of those, and I always often wonder if I've done enough, if I'm good enough,
Mm-hmm.
if I've achieved everything I should be achieving, both as a father and as a husband and as a friend, and let alone as a business leader and contributor. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do kind of agonize over a lot of these things, to be honest. And it ebbs and flows. I'm somewhat of an introvert who plays an extrovert on TV type of thing, but I take my role very seriously, so I take feedback very seriously and try to improve and
Mm-hmm.
really aim for perfection, which is probably not healthy, right?
Oh
Because it
yeah.
ends up being really hard. I end up being very hard on myself and being my own worst critic. And
Yeah.
then it can spiral into challenging areas. And I think that's not uncommon for high achievers, and not uncommon for people are driven. That goes from therapists to real estate
Mm-hmm.
agents to business leaders or athletes, all the rest of it. The mental health element, which is a big part of the reason why I'm happy to be on the show today. The mental health is a crucial part of it, and that of everyone's success and acceptance to talk about these very sensitive matters.
I really appreciate your honesty and transparency and sharing all of that with us. I really do appreciate that. And I think it's sometimes could be eye opening for some people that are tuning in to go, oh, okay, wow, look at all these accomplishments. Like I'd read them again; they're very long, and this individual's struggled also with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that you have to do all of these things that Jeff has done over here, but it's just that I've worked with over 1,000 people at this point in my career, high level, literally everybody from literally on the streets to the CEOs and the tallest skyscrapers to some
Mm.
celebrities, athletes. I've kind of worked with a lot of different people, and I found that number one, mental health goes across the board. Everybody struggles with something. I've never met anybody that's escaped childhood unscathed from something. So that's certainly there. Um, and you're right. There's a lot of burden on a lot of people now. Depending on what your role is, the stresses might shift. It might not be about looking for where you're going to find your next meal, but it's more
Mm-hmm.
likely, am I going to be able to provide the lifestyle for my family that I dream of providing? Am I going to be able to spend time with them? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different things I might be considering. And when you're the CEO, it's very lonely at the top. I mean, you probably heard that many times before. That's a very lonely gig.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
Hmm.
There's absolutely a lot of truth to that. That's partly why I'm a member of a couple of CEO forums. I'm part of the McKay CEO Forum, and it's a group of other executives. And I'm also part of the Innovators Alliance, which is based in Ontario. And this gives you a chance to talk to openly with other people facing similar challenges, because you can't always open up to everyone, right? And you know, I often pride myself in my ability to be open and vulnerable and very transparent,
Yep.
but there's a time and a place for it. And I don't want to alarm 15,000 members or something like that. There's different issues I want to make sure that I'm providing the leadership that they deserve.
Yeah, and so in case you didn't catch it, so Greater Vancouver Realtors is comprised of 15,000 members.
Hmm.
And from the stats that I was able to grab from LinkedIn, so you correct me if I'm wrong here,
Okay, all right.
but employees roughly 51 to 200. Roughly, how big is
About
the company?
110. The
110. Yeah,
110, yeah.
that's a lot of people, right? A lot of people are
Yeah.
concerned with maybe one to 10, but this is 110. So there's a lot of, and I think you're talking about something really important I want to highlight. Um, is that there's when it's not that you're never going to share anything, right? But
Hmm.
there's boundaries, there's limits, there's degrees of access that people need to have in order for you to operate effectively and provide the leadership that you want to lead. I'm getting the sense, though, I can already tell because we're first time really meeting each other, but You seem like the kind of person that if the door was open, you came in and somebody had a grievance, you'd be there to listen, right? It's like
Absolutely. Yeah.
very easy to tell. You got a smile that I can tell. The heart's huge, and I really appreciate all that. And but it is important that I think what you also highlighted is that you have a group of people that you are also connected to that you might share, and they're
Hmm.
in the same kind, maybe not the same industry or the same position, but there's a commonality that you're sharing together.
Hmm. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Hmm.
And the stories are quite consistent, right? And they're often people challenges and the different dynamics and things like that. And
Yeah.
I'm no different than my peers, that's for sure.
I really love that. And so, often I put this graphic on, which I'll put on now as well.
Okay.
When we do the recording or the editing part. So there's the as a trauma therapist, I think of everything in terms of trauma. I think of the nervous system, how everything operates, and
Hmm.
there's basically three different levels of our nervous system, how it responds to stress. So we've got this green zone down here. This is a really ventral vagal. It's called calm, grounded. This is peaceful, or this is where everyone wants to be. And then as stress increases in the nervous system, we get into that fight or flight, that
Hmm.
hyper arousal that many people have heard of, right? And there's the important thing about that is although it's really uncomfortable, there is a sense that I can still handle it. I can still operate. I can run away, or I can fight this, saber-tooth tiger off, and I'll
Right.
make it. Okay, but then once the stress gets too great, we get into that red zone. This is called dorsal vagal shutdown, hypoarousal up here. It's extremely overwhelming for the individual. This is where depression shows up. This is where addictions show up. This is where I've lived some of my life. Shame is up here. Suicidal ideations up here. Lots and lots let's say quote unquote normal stuff is up here. So I'm sharing this right now, not for an educational session or something like that, but just to provide some sense of normalization that these are actually normal parts of the nervous system, normal responses to stress. And it's not like something's wrong with you if you're listening in, you're watching in, and you're noticing that you're facing, some anxiety or depression or having some dark thoughts. Obviously, speak to a professional about those. Talk to some, people that you really trust, and it has to be the right people. Um, and then obviously have a conversation about that. But I really want to share that because it's important to me that people know that this is stuff that everybody can experience. And if you are experiencing it, it doesn't mean that you're broken. It just means that you're human.
Hmm. Well said.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about about some other things here too. So I think
Hmm.
in terms of some of the mental health challenges, um, what's sort of the typical thing you'd see for realtors, sort of anxiety, depression, like what would you normally tend to see if somebody's struggling?
Well, I'm not a mental health professional, so take this,
That's okay, of course.
as from for the amateur view that it is.
Right.
But I do think things like anxiety and depression are quite common
Hmm.
for most industries, and that includes real estate
Probably in
participants.
in the music industry, I bet too, and
Oh,
industry.
yeah, that's the thing. Like the commonalities you sort of spread around, right? And there's times when there's a group dynamic where you're working together on building a software, or you're in a band, or you're a real estate team. And then there's frustration over, maybe one party's not pulling their weight, or they're having their own struggles, different things like that. It's amazing how these things go across the spectrum, across industries.
Mhm.
And I know each industry is a little bit different. They have their nuances, their own lingo, their own three-letter acronyms, and all that type of thing. But the general elements of it are shockingly similar across the way. But I think one of the things to be mindful of is when people are struggling is to not ignore it.
Mm.
Both the individual themselves, if you're struggling, or if your listeners are struggling, they should reach out to someone or find someone they can talk to, professional or amateur or whatever the case may be. I think that that is a big opportunity, and is often hard to overcome in Western societies, as there's
Yeah.
still a stigma attached to it, where people are nervous about doing that.
Hmm.
And then the flip side is if you notice something with somebody, and if you notice that they don't seem quite right, and I try to be very focused on reading people and reading rooms. I think I have a decent skill set along those things. And if I interact with somebody and they seem off, either someone I know or barely know, I'll
Hmm.
ask them if everything is all right. And it's impressive how often people will open up and say, you know
Really?
what, I'm struggling with something, and they're surprised that I picked up on it. But it's not that surprising. They show it on their face,
Yes.
right? But I'm trying my best, at least for myself and people I interact with, to increase the normalcy of these types of interactions.
That is huge. Can I pause you there for a second
Yeah,
and bring some
absolutely.
attention to that? So a little while ago, I was doing some research on workplace mental health and for various different reasons, and I found that according to the Canadian Mental Health Association, I'm pretty sure this is the correct statistic. About 75, I think, percent of people, employees, are really nervous and they would not disclose to their
Mm,
bosses because of fear of some sort of negative repercussion due to the stigma. And, unless you're I guess even the president, responds to the board,
hmm.
so kind of like everybody has a boss to some degree, right? And the board has
Yep.
investors and like, so everybody has a boss. And so what I'm hearing you say, that's the other part of the statistic is that they are much more likely to disclose. I think either two, three, four times more likely to disclose that they have a physical condition, like if they get diagnosed with cancer or
Mm,
diabetes or yeah, this is what's going on, or going through a separation. It's much more likely to share that, but I'm having a really hard time with my mental health. That seems
hmm.
to be something that the majority of people in Canada are afraid to do. And this is a CEO telling you that he's willing to listen and it's okay, correct? Can you say
Hmm.
more about that?
Absolutely. I think it's part of my obligation, both as the CEO of the organization, and we're a professional association, representing realtors and brokers and the like, but also amongst for the employees. I think it's part of an obligation that people should expect that I'm available that way.
Mm.
But I also think as a human, right? I like if I bumped into you at the coffee shop and you look like you're having a tough go, there's nothing wrong with me saying, "Is everything all right?"
Yeah.
Right? And I think there's an obligation there to do that, both for me to do it. You don't have to accept it. You can say, "No, everything's fine," or "The car's not running good. Leave me alone," or whatever it is. But I think the making these things more of a standard interaction, I think, is part of the journey that all of society is on. I still think we have a long ways to go, but it's much better than it was, say, 30 years ago.
God, I appreciate that's why the show exists. It's for that exact reason that,
Mm,
let's start talking more about these issues and get out there. I mean, you never know. I usually take things to the extreme. So the extreme example is you never know if somebody's going through a hard time. Maybe they're thinking of ending their lives, and you
hmm.
simply smile at them or you say, "Hey, is everything all right? Can I
Yeah.
buy you a coffee? It doesn't cost, the arm, leg, or, and, just to another degree, I was in my car. I had my almost 3-year-old daughter, my wife, and
Mm,
we're in the parking lot. I turned off the car, had the ignition off, and I had the battery going so I could listen to my podcast.
mm,
And there you have it. My battery died, and there I'm sitting,
mm.
stranded. I'm now quite frustrated because I have clients to get to, the rest of the day, and I'm like, great, now I'm stuck.
Right.
And that moment in time, I felt super alone. Now this is just a car battery dying, right? This isn't
Right.
like
It's not the
the
end of the
end of the
world
world
stuff.
here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And even in that, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can ask everybody, for some help. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, hey, do you by any chance have some jumper cables, and try to figure this out? And that little bit of niceness, when
Mm,
like that courage to ask for help,
mm.
really, 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 it completely made my day. The person I asked, he said, no, I'm sorry, I don't have any cables. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, don't worry about it. And he went inside of the building and came back out. And then, I still had the trunk open, waiting for CAA to show up, and
Hmm.
and they were not coming quick enough. That's not a knock on them, but I'm sure they're busy.
Yeah.
We should talk on the show.
Yeah.
Um, but he came back and he's like, "Hey, would you like me to go to my house and bring cables for you? I only have 5 minutes away. I can come back." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, would you really? Thank you." So that me 10 years ago would not have been able to do that. Me of now, I'm able to receive and ask for help and receive it, and my day was made exponentially greater for that. That is a small sliver example, but could you imagine if you're carrying the stress that I don't know if I can pay my mortgage because I'm going
Hmm.
through a really hard time. I'm having troubles with alcohol or whatever it might be,
Yep.
and then you can go and you can talk to the CEO and say I'm struggling, and he's going to have an open heart, and I'm going to assume that there's some sort of support. Maybe there's at least you're not going to get canned for doing that, right?
Oh no, yeah, of course, yeah. But yeah, I do have a giant heart, and it's I think one of my strengths, frankly. And I try to be very helpful. But you raise an interesting point because I'm not good personally at asking for help. I will take on everything and don't want to burden anyone with my challenges. And when I reflect on it, even over the weekend when I was thinking about being on the podcast today, I was thinking, yeah, when was the last time I asked someone for help? I don't. If anything, I'll just say it's fine and I'll internalize whatever the
Mhm.
issue is. And I think there's an opportunity here for me to get better about these types of things.
Wow.
But I think Robert, you're right. I think that yeah, the being human and helping each other out is an important thing. Just like the person who got the jumper cables for you,
Hmm.
or if I have an open door, or if someone needs time off, or whatever it is. And people are under a lot of stress, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy to sort of just get into the mindset of, well, just do your job, or just get your own jumper cables, whatever it is,
Hmm.
right? But the reality is we're bombarded with 50 to 60,000 bits of information in a month. You know, the price of gas, there's a new tariff, there's a conflict in the Middle East. Most of it's not good news story type stuff,
Yeah.
right? And so it's easy to get wrapped up into it and then start to become concerned about different elements that are happening, and it can be overwhelming. You know, so on this past Friday, when I was leaving, I bumped into someone in the parking lot that works here. End up talking to that person for an hour, just sort of working through a bunch of geopolitical issues that
Wow.
don't the two of us are not involved in individually,
Hmm.
but are weighing on this person's mind. And then just and essentially, I was an outlet and sort of said, okay, you know, yeah, these tariffs are probably coming. This is being recorded on Monday, February 3rd,
Yep.
shortly after the announcement of the tariffs. We still don't know how this is all going to shake out, but people agonize over this type of stuff. And when you
Yes.
get peppered with it, or if you're in an echo chamber on because if either the way you interact with people, or you live on your own, or how you interact with social media, I
Yep.
think that those things just can be exacerbated rapidly. Um,
100%. I was just having a conversation with my parents yesterday. They're thinking about selling their house in Ontario, and
hmm,
they're getting information from their realtors saying, well, maybe we should put it on sooner because we don't know what's going to happen with the tariffs. And I think one of the things that's really difficult with that particular issue, which also, on a side note, I was going to ask you about that. I guess the answer is
right,
I don't know, which is
yeah,
fine. But that itself is very anxiety provoking. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And
yep,
that is such now if you knew it was going to be this and it was awful, you can plan for that and you can adjust. But when you don't know what's going to happen, usually, and this is how most human brains work, we go to the worst case scenario. Worst
hmm,
case scenario for a lot of people, I'm not going to be able to keep up. I'm going to somehow fail. And if you're a high performing professional, that usually means that you've got a lot of things that you're responsible for, right? So it's a lot of
yep,
stress.
absolutely. And you know, people have broad shoulders and they take it on themselves, but it just ends up compounding and compounding and compounding.
Hmm. I really appreciate it, and thank you also, subtly just reflect back what you said, that you're also acknowledging and maybe asking for help is something that you could work on. And I'm so glad and grateful that you shared that here with us because, I don't think anybody's perfect. And I
Hmm.
don't care who you are. It's not about how much, how many assets you have or how successful you've been. It's really about, who you are moving through the world. And if you're, smiling, but and this is about you specifically, it's
Hmm.
about really anybody. how many celebrities have we looked at that are comedians that are smiling all the time, making other people laugh, and then you hear in the news that they committed suicide or, something like that, and
Yeah,
it just breaks people's hearts. Like, how many people whoever, you're tuning in, I think people would rather talk to you on the phone about how tough things are, or visit you, and even in a hospital if you have to go because you might be suicidal, than rather hear about the news that way than by seeing you in the funeral.
yeah,
So, God, thank you.
yeah. No, that's very true. The uh, Robin Williams' last gift to Earth was to raise awareness around that people may be smiling and quick with a joke and high energy, but there's pain within. And there's
Yeah.
complications and all the rest of it. And I get that, but we have to find better ways to communicate with each other around these types of topics.
So this is one of them. I think this is one of them right now.
Yeah.
And like, if you're tuning in, share this with people, talk about it.
Hmm.
And I think it's a good segue too about some of the myths we're talking about. There's a perception out in the acting world, the entertainment industry, where people might be smiling and happy and just doing great songs about stuff, and or music or movies, or and then they're actually not well at all, right? Because suicide and depression and mental health, people can mask that very, very well, and they can look like everything's totally fine. And then, yeah, you get the news. So from your perspective, in terms of myths out there that you've seen
Hmm.
in any of the industries that you've worked in, what are some things that you want to bring awareness to people?
Okay. Probably the one there's two or three of them actually, to be honest, Robert. The one that jumps out the most is the myth that and this goes for real estate, but also for music. The myth that it's easy. And everyone and you alluded to it in the opening about the reality shows, and someone's got a Rolls Royce and a helicopter, and then you watch and think, hey, I can do that, and this is easy and stuff. It's not easy to be a realtor. It's not easy to be a musician or a songwriter or a composer. It takes special gifts and the combination of talents to be able to do these types of things and to make a living at it. But because of a variety of things, including reality television and hyperconnectivity, between social media and things like that,
Hmm.
it starts to look easy. It looks easier than it really is, right? And I think that ends up causing stress and strain on the other folks. Saying, "Boy, that looks so easy for person X or person Y. I'm not as successful, so I'm a failure. I can't do it." And then they start to tear themselves up and they struggle
Hmm.
with it. And I've seen this with the incredibly talented household names in the music industry, but also very high-profile realtors
Hmm.
who work like crazy to make
Yeah.
it happen. And
Yeah.
there's a huge industrious work ethic with
Yes.
these people that is relentless. But you don't see that. That's like the duck on the water, the legs going furiously, but it looks so easy as they go across. I think that's one of the big myths.
Love
I
that.
think the other one, and I think that goes for a lot of industries, but these are the two I probably know the best. Another big myth is that the reward in of itself is enough. So the round of applause or the warm hug when you sell the house, or the commission check or whatever it is, that's enough.
Hmm.
Sometimes it is, often it's not. Often it's a small element of a greater mosaic. And I think that's another sort of myth, is that there's a singular transaction that happens. And I think psychologically there's so much complexity to it, and that's why when people are hyper successful, they can still be sad because they're focusing on, well, I'm going to get a round of applause, or I'm going to get more sales than I got last year, and that helps a bit, but doesn't provide all that other different dimensions to it, and
Hmm.
that is a key element. And that's why you'll find people who have a whole list of accomplishments, but they feel like a failure, or they feel like
Yes.
they could have done more because of the way the brain is focused.
Yes.
It's kind of the reverse of the thing rustling in the bushes,
Hmm.
right? And we're afraid of the saber-toothed cat, and so we're always nervous, just like when we hear news, saying, "Oh, how's this going to affect me negatively?"
Yep.
But the flip side is, oh, something good happens, the everything's fine. No,
Yep.
there's lots of other different pieces. Those would probably be the couple of the biggest myths
Yeah.
that I do on it. And then probably the third one, and I think anyone listening to this can probably relate to it. The myth that it ends, it doesn't end. You always have to keep churning and developing, or you retire, or
Mm.
just stop doing it, because the old thing, you're only as good as your last game or your last deal or your last concert or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Uh, the That perpetual part drives some people, but for some people it can be quite daunting because the work will never end, right? There's always something to be done, and
Wow.
that can become quite overwhelming. So the myth is, boy, if I can just have this one thing, or if I can just get a record deal, I'll have it made. No,
Yes.
a whole new set of issues starts to pop out, right? And that's, I think, is a bit of a myth. And I think if people
Hmm.
can help recognize that going into it, that can be extremely helpful towards their own mental health and balance and sort of zen with the universe.
Amazing. I'm gonna unpack this backwards,
Okay.
because I took some
And
notes.
I'm an amateur, so bear with me here.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. Okay, so this is just how my brain works as a trauma therapist. I always think about trauma, nervous system, and from my EMDR background. So the idea that the myth that it ends,
Hmm.
that's a pervasive thing that happens in our culture, for sure in this side of the world. I'm not so sure if it's everywhere else in the world, but certainly here, you just once I become the CEO, then it's all good, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, guess
exactly.
what? No, no,
Yeah,
that's not the no. There's a lot more things.
yeah.
Um, and so then you have to work extra hard and extremely hard to get where you are. I guess what sort of feeds in that first myth as well, because so many times, and I see this very often, especially with the professional crowd of people that we
Hmm.
often see, that we will, and I'm including myself in this, I am totally guilty of this, burning the candlestick at both ends so that
Oh
you
yeah.
can get, done. So just, I've literally worked 7 days a week. Today, I was so excited for today. I woke up at 3:45. I was like, I can't wait to talk to Jeff today. So for that, it's a bit, but I'll wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock and I'll work and on the
Hmm.
business on the side, and I part of that I love, so it's a labor of love for that.
Hmm.
But how many things for people are being sacrificed for that idea that when I get to blank, it'll all be over for me, right? So
Hmm.
so I won't play with my kids, when they're little. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old almost at this point in time. And, after this, I'm going to take the day off and we're going to go play in the snow. So, like,
Oh
that's
wow.
such an important thing for me to do. But so many times I said no because I knew I had to just build this thing and just get the website done, just get this new thing out. And here I'm missing the moment. I'm missing the moment of life. I think that
Hmm.
is such an important part. Um, it's always something else. I think life is about adapting, right? Because the sun shines and then it sets, and then it shines and then it sets, and there's going to be
Hmm.
disasters, and there's things that are coming. The world is not static. There is nothing in this universe is still. So there's always going to be changes. I
Hmm.
really love that. It's all about adapting. We have to build our nervous system ourselves to be adaptable in this changing world. So cool. And even you
Yeah.
said maybe retirement, but even retirement things happen too, right? Now your kids are
Oh,
growing up and they need this or they need help with that, or now you've got an illness or something. Like it never ends.
it never ends. And you're 100% right. And retirement just sort of provides relief from the work world,
Correct.
but there's still financial pressures. There's health, or I don't see the kids, or they live far away, and or it turns into a Jim Croce song where they phone you and say I can't make it and all that type of stuff. And I think that causes other stress, and that's why depression rates are so high with senior citizens.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, that the feeling of isolation and alone, let alone if a partner passes away and things like that. And again, as a society, we do some things that are pretty good along those lines, but it's very individualistic. It
Mm-hmm.
depends on the family, depends on the circumstances. But there's are a lot of people just sort of on their own, sort of going through it,
Yes.
and so I try to be very mindful of those types of things.
I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you said that,
Yeah.
because everybody, not just employees or
Hmm.
members, they're all humans, and same with the buyers, the sellers, the
Yep.
brokers, like everybody that's involved, they're all humans, like you said it earlier today, and so mental health is a human thing. I really really appreciate that. And then the second myth that you said, so going backwards here, was that
Mm.
the reward is enough. And then the first one was it's easy. And I want to tie this back into what you said earlier about having a group. You have like a like
Mm.
a forum that you speak to, and I
Hmm.
I've had so many clients that are in these higher positions, and it is so lonely. And it doesn't even have to be like a higher position. It could be any position, but you're not getting seen or recognized by the people around you. Like, let's say
Yeah.
you're a mechanic, and
Mm.
the people in your life, they don't understand mechanics, right? So you're like, oh,
Right.
I'm really stressed. I'm not a mechanic, so
Yeah.
probably a bad example. But I'm like, well, this part of the car isn't working, or the catalytic converters, and I just gloss over. I have no idea what you're saying because I don't connect with that. So if you work in an industry or you've got issues and you're keeping it to yourself, it's incredibly isolating. We're human species. We need
Hmm.
people.
If I may add, Robert, you're quite right. And for specific industries where there's skill sets required,
Hmm.
it can easily become part of your identity, right?
Yes.
So the mechanic is like, well, he's the mechanic in the family, and so all
Yes.
the interactions are, hey, how do we get it so Robert's car doesn't die or whatever it is, right?
Yes. Yes.
And the same goes for lawyers and medical professionals. It's there's a certain boost to the ego for being a draw that way for the people,
Hmm.
but it also can be destroying to their self identity.
Yes.
My wife is a ICU nurse,
Oh,
and
bless you. Thank you.
it's interesting how she's sort of the go-to person for so many people around. Oh, how's this work? Or I was told this, I don't quite understand. And she works very hard on to sort of
Yes.
trying to make sure there's a good balance. But you see it over and over again. I have close friends who are lawyers, and if, when they tell their stories, I often think like, dude, 80% of your family interactions are, I'm looking for legal advice for free,
Uh-huh.
right? And those types of things happen. I think that's hard on the person
It's huge.
because it ends up you create a gap that you're not just a hired gun.
You
There's other
become
elements that you're providing.
you become more of an object. You become objectified. It's not about the person; it's about the profession, right? And
Hmm.
and and I think we sometimes therapists get the same thing too, where
Absolutely.
they're
Yeah.
like, "Hey, what do you think's going on with this person?" Or the flip side, they don't want to talk to you because they're afraid they're going to be psychoanalyzed. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
no, no,
Yeah.
I don't do that. I don't walk around like that's not what I do. I really appreciate that. I think that's such an important thing. I'm glad that's we brought light to that. And then the first one you said about it being easy, the process being easy, the success
Hmm.
is easy. There's a cliche out there that something about every overnight success took 10 years in the
Right.
making. That one.
Yeah. 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 Of
Um,
course. Yeah.
and I think that's very, very true. But we get this illusion that whether it be a realtor or actually, I was a musician myself. I was a lead
Hmm.
singer and a rhythm guitarist in a band in Vancouver
Oh,
called
cool.
Earthbound George. Link some stuff there. But it was an extreme challenge.
Yeah.
Like coming up with the music, writing the songs, playing it, practicing it, create like there was so much that goes into every little bit and piece of it. And this was even before social media was even that where it is today. The
Hmm.
pressure is huge. I've got friends that are musicians that literally had made top 100, had surpassed some very well household names that you would clearly recognize, and incredibly stressful, and an
Yeah.
enormous amount of work. And so I think that is a huge myth. I'm glad you're bringing that up. That is not easy. It might be
Yeah.
simple, but it's not easy sometimes.
That's exactly. I was just about to say that, and I'm with you. And just because someone makes it look easy,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it is,
No.
right? And some of the feedback over the years that's kind of hurt me the most is when people say, "Well, your job's easy. You're not
Oh
dealing with this
God.
stuff," or you can just do this and all the rest of it. I don't feel that way. I feel like does take a lot of hard work and dedication and focus
Yes.
for all kind of variety of different jobs. the 17-year-old who's working the counter at Tim Hortons. That job is not easy, right? And everything
Mhm.
from complex orders to rude customers to dealing with people with mental health breakdowns
Yep.
and everything in between.
Yep.
And I think it's easy to sort of dehumanize a lot of these interactions and just say, well, my chicken sandwich is wrong or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And I think that's also problematic.
Huge. Huge. I love that. It's and so everybody. So I guess maybe a message here is to be a little bit kinder and gentler and a bit more compassionate when all of us move through the world, because you never know what's going on in that person's life, and
Hmm.
everything's harder. Just because a brain surgeon might make that slice look really easy, that probably took 25 years of painstaking practice to get
Yeah.
that cut to be like that, and then that's all I need. So it doesn't really matter, whether something looks easy. I mean, that's beautiful, but we have, I think, to respect the amount of effort that actually goes into becoming the best or really good at something it is. Is there
Mhm.
because talking about us being like sort of in this marginalized or this this
Mhm.
population where I've seen higher performing professionals. Sometimes the when schedules are busy, there's a lot of responsibilities. There's little to no time to get the support. Finances may or may not be an issue. I can't tell you the number of people that were um, seemingly very well off. Obviously, I
Mhm.
won't share names, but finances may be really tough. You might have three homes to your name, but you might not have a dollar that you can use right now.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
possibilities. So there's a lot of stress. And I think that, if we can kind of highlight that, this becomes a challenge for a lot of people to get the support that they need sometimes because they don't have the space in their calendar. They can't commit to 30 sessions over the course of, 30 months or whatever. It becomes a challenge, it becomes quite lonely. What would be a message that you'd want to
Mhm.
share with your brothers and sisters, that are listening in?
Okay, so there's a couple elements there. The first part, the one the string that you're sort of picking on about people being isolated, I think you're quite right. I think there's more human interconnectivity than we've ever had in our history,
Yes.
like by a mile.
Mm-hmm.
And you're only 2 or 3 degrees of separation from the King of England and from Trump and from you name it, celebrity, right?
Yes. Yes.
That was unheard of 125 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but despite the increased interconnectivity, we have much less connection because the time constraints are so hard and so demanding. We have little of those deep rooted things with our local town or local village. Maybe our family we have to some degree, but even that, not so much. I haven't seen my cousins in decades.
Yes. Yes.
Different things like that are important features. Uh, I think one thing is to make sure that you be mindful of it. This, I'm not a big advice giver, but my sort of
Mm-hmm.
insight would be to try to make time to be able to do these types of things and to try to connect with people and be very intentional about it. Because and sort of tell them, hey, I want to connect with you, or I
Mm.
miss you, and let's have a talk or whatever.
It's huge.
Yeah, and I think that openness and that kind of almost by Western standards vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
can help move conversations forward. It's not for everyone, and it's not comfortable, but I think those are the types of things as you start to evolve. Life can be very, very lonely. All right,
Yeah.
even if you're in a large, busy house and lots of people and all the rest of it. And I'm glad you brought up the financial element because I think a lot of people struggle with finances. They're, as generally, people are not great at managing money. They try their best. They follow some standard norms, but you read the stories, you see how things go sideways, a couple of bad decisions, or something goes in a different way, and it can be devastating, and it can
Yeah.
feel almost impossible to climb out of it. And then that just compounds everything.
Huge. Wow. I'm glad that you're saying that. And ironically, I did the last show that I recorded was with a financial analyst, a financial expert, Tracy
Mm,
Themes. She's incredible. That's one of the topics we talked about. The potential, PTSD because of financial stress. People are
yeah.
laying awake at night wondering. Again, it could be anything from when am I going to get my next $10
Hmm.
to, is this sale going to go through or not? And like my whole life savings is tied up in this, or,
Yeah.
I like it can be incredibly stressful. And you're right entirely. Even if the house is full, nobody around you might really know what you're going through. And the way in, I'm hearing you say, is communication.
Hmm.
Hey, I miss you. I want to have some time with you.
Yeah.
Let's now. How can a realtor do that? Because we've got this maybe it's a misperception, but I've got
Hmm.
this perception that the realtor's phone's always on, and because it's feast or famine, you eat what you kill. If
Yeah.
you're not awake at 3 o'clock or whatever it might be, when maybe there's some boundaries here, maybe, but maybe it's a Sunday and you're out with your kids and you're playing in the snow and somebody's like, "Hey, I want to have a conversation. I might want to sell. This is, and then do they just go? Do they drop everything and go, or
Some
what do they
do.
do?"
I can't speak for all of them, and
Of
I'm
course,
not an agent, so
right? Of course,
but
of
I'm
course,
going
of
off
course.
my own perception. Some will drop everything and go, and that's kind of what they do. And I think there's a cost for that that gets
Mhm.
that is not necessarily appreciated. So I can speak from my own experience.
Yeah.
I'm kind of an always on type person,
Yes.
So if I get a work email, regardless of the time, or if there's something that's going on related to the industry or the business that I see at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll dig into it, which is not healthy and not smart. And I try to be healthy and I try to be smart, but I'll do these things
Yeah.
because I pride myself on my ability to be responsive and accessible and all those
Yes.
things. But if
Yes.
I'm to be my own self critic,
Hmm.
I probably shouldn't do that. I should find ways to put in the clutch and take downtime and not work all nonstop.
Yeah.
I think realtors in general do work hard and have unusual hours. A lot of the work's done in the evening, a lot of it over the weekends, not during your standard sort of 9 to 5 workday. There's still elements of that, of course, but I think those things, and that has an impact on the family, right? So
Hmm.
the kids are in school during the day, say, or the spouse may work at a different type of more traditional hour type job.
Yeah.
And so the stress is, the realtor parent is not around most nights, or misses school events, or things like that.
Yeah.
And so you have to be I think, very mindful of those types of things in order to ensure that there's a healthy dialogue in the house. Keeping in mind, you eat what you kill. You have to sort of make that living, and so it's a tough balancing act. And I think most struggle with it.
I think you're right.
Yeah, they know what has to be done, and they try to find ways to balance it. The teams approach, where they work together in teams, does
Hmm.
seem to be a way to balance things out, where they support each other. And I'm hearkened when I see those types of things. The highly functioning teams seem to be quite successful, and I hear about stories about people actually taking vacation, things like that. And that's kind of encouraging.
That is huge. I really appreciate that. Acknowledging both that, sometimes you'll get pulled into, and this could be a passion thing. We're so
Hmm.
involved and love the industry. Like I might also get pulled into, so I see a new, EMDR study or a
Right.
new, mental health statistic that is, oh, I have to dig into that. I might be kind of inspired to go there. I'm usually not waking up at 2 o'clock, but, um, what I'm hearing you say without saying it is that there's two things that are probably really important. Number one, boundaries, and number two,
Mm.
communication. To really understand, okay, so this might be different if you're getting into real estate to be an agent, as a career move. That might be a new thing. But
Hmm.
if you're about to get into a relationship with a realtor, probably this should be a conversation that you have, around understanding what the boundaries are with time.
Yeah.
The kids, another story because they might not quite understand because they're little maybe. I think this communication and really understanding, what those boundaries are, that's going to be the key to a successful marriage or successful, balanced life, whatever that is, you
Hmm.
know.
And it's different for everyone, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's something to keep in mind. Like, for some people, what is perfectly acceptable might be unacceptable for others in terms of access or lack of access. And then you
Yes.
compound it with the realtors and most professions, the competition is intense.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yep.
26,000 realtors in British Columbia that can
Wow.
get your listing
Yes.
or
Yep.
represent that buyer and all those types of things. So
Yes.
there's a significant level of competition for the work and for the opportunities that are out there.
Yes.
I think that adds a level of stress as well, you know,
Yes.
and the same goes for executives and other people in different industries, not just GVR, but the banks are competing for business, and they're competing against other forces outside of Canada and the rest.
So
Uh,
right.
and the all those dimensions I think are important part, and that's why people do the crazy work hours sometimes. I was reading with interest over the weekend how Bank of America brought in like an 80-hour work week with the idea of trying to cap people at 80 hours because they had people that were working 100 hours a week
Oh my.
and getting sick or
Yeah. Yeah.
making mistakes, things like that were happening.
Yes.
And I thought, what kind of culture has it where they think, okay, we're going to cap you at something that extreme, right? And so it's a cultural element about that company and frankly the nature of the business that they're in. That's
Right.
not sustainable long term, I think. And I think there's got to be better ways to handle those things. Um, I think there's a lesson to be learned there for small companies like GVR and for individual contributors, people who run one or two person shops,
Mm-hmm.
be it a realtor or a dry cleaner or whatever it is. Yeah, it's important because it can take its toll, and then you can get blinded with your decision making.
Yes, yes, yeah. It's going to lead into decision fatigue or something. If you're too much, you're working too much. You
Yeah.
can't, you get burned out. I've already burnt out twice in my career,
Mm.
maybe three times actually.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Ironically, the higher
yeah.
your capacity, the you might burn out less, but the risk is probably bigger because the
Hmm.
burnout might just be like an unbelievable boom, you're dead, or something serious physically happens, or
Yeah,
things like that.
it's
That's
huge.
huge.
Well, we could. I mean, I think that's a whole nother. We could probably talk about that for another hour. I don't want
Yeah.
to be
Come back for
respectful
another
of your
episode.
time.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
great, good.
Yeah.
I was going to
Yeah.
ask you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cross that off the list. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's sort of begin to wrap it up a little bit here, and because
Sure.
there's so much we could talk about, but I want to kind of just lead into. If there's any useful tips or hacks or strategies or things that you've developed over your career, um, what would that something you might want to share with people if you can sort of think what might be helpful?
Okay. I can only speak to my own way of working.
Okay.
But so it may not be for everyone, but I really rely on my calendar. And if I schedule different
Yes.
things, it allows me to manage my time better. And
Yes.
I'm able to achieve more, and my output's higher, my throughput is more complete, like things I have to approve, things like that.
Okay.
Um, the Early in my career, I just it was like a fire hose, and I did everything,
Yeah.
and it got to be just entirely unwieldy. And then
Right.
I was when I was around 30, I got promoted to vice president, and I started realizing I can't do this forever. I got to find ways to stage these things, so almost like an assembly line. And I became relatively skilled at that. It's still a challenge. I'm not going to kid you, Robert. I'm not going to say I just sit around nothing to do. But at least I know like, from this time to this time, I'm on a podcast with Robert. Then I'm doing this and I'm meeting these other folks. And I got different things like that to help me flow and get organized. And it takes my stress level way down.
Amazing.
Kind of know what's happening and everything else that goes to the sidelines. And then I try to be intentional. So I'll shut off my email notifications if I'm on a podcast or if I'm in a meeting. Sometimes there's like an emergency hotline, like if the family's got to get a hold of me or something like that, but I'll keep
Right.
that
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
Of
I
course.
do that to try to manage it that way.
Wow.
Um, the other thing I've done really since, probably really since I took this job, I work out a lot. And so I ride the Peloton every day. I'm on a very lengthy Peloton streak. I'll spend an hour riding a bike and lifting weights. It's hard to do emails when you're riding the bike or lifting weights and things like that. I'm not saying I'm in great shape, but I'm doing
Love
my
that.
bit to do that. And again, if I reflect on myself, it's a calendar thing, right? Because I'm sort
Hmm.
of blocking off that chunk of time. can't get a hold of me. And it gives me all the endorphins and stuff like that come out of it. I think that's been helpful and that's been kind of useful. And then work-wise, there's a couple of things I try to keep in mind. I meet my commitments. If I I'm thoughtful about my commitments, but I go overboard to meet them, which is not always healthy. Because sometimes I'll do like almost an all-nighter to get something done, which is silly.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other element that I try to keep in mind, and I coach and mentor probably around a dozen people. Um, at the end of the day, a lot of what we do just doesn't matter. We get all wrapped up in like, oh my goodness, if I can just get this contract done by Tuesday at noon, it'll be, what, as we talked about earlier, it's not about that singular thing.
Yes.
It's more about a process and all the rest of it.
Yes.
And I've become better at that, realizing the materiality of things. And I find I get frustrated when people are not paying attention to materiality and they're going in like, who picked the font for this email type of conversation. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't care, right? And as I've gotten older and more seasoned, I've become more diligent around that. I
Yeah.
pay attention to the important stuff, of course, but the other stuff I try to ignore. And to my own fault, I'll get frustrated when others try to dive into that stuff. So that's one of my big things I want to do for 2025 is to get better about disconnecting when people go down these rabbit holes or go into minutia or data dives that are not really useful.
I love that. That's super helpful, and we'll make sure to to list those out in the show notes for people as well, because it's such an important thing to really. I mean, everybody has the same amount of time per day per week that everybody else has, and to be able to
Yeah.
I think I'm hearing you say prioritizing, so scheduling, prioritizing as best you can, and I also, nobody's perfect. You're not going to get it
Yeah.
always. You might be striving for perfection. We could talk about that later, but
Yeah.
it's by having limits and sticking to those limits as best you can, you get the best things. So if something is have that little level 10 importance, maybe that's the
Hmm.
first thing on your list for Monday morning to do. Versus something that's like a level 1 that can be like, if you have time, we'll get to that. Somebody else can do it. Maybe it doesn't have to be, top of mind. I think that's such an important thing.
I agree wholeheartedly. I was going to say it for the sum up, but I'll say it now because you remind me.
Okay.
I relentlessly prioritize and
Yes.
I empower everyone I work with. If they have something and they run with it, I let them run with it. They're the CEO of their own area and their own career. I'm
Oh,
here to help, provide air cover, take away challenges, but they run with it and own it. And I find they develop to be stronger and better managers and leaders, and also it means I'm not doing everything for everybody. I'm not business dad. I'm a coworker that has a series of responsibilities, and I'm kind of obsessed on it. But I think that's the only way to lead. But I run into a lot of executives who do not do that. They'll
mm,
micromanage and they'll go right down into the nitty gritty, and I find that's hard on everybody, including the micromanager.
amazing. That is. I love what you said. Everybody is the CEO of their own area, whatever that might
Yeah,
be. So,
whatever it is. Yeah.
empower people around you. This is a theme that's come up in earlier episodes too, that I think, empower people around you to be their best selves. Because you don't want, I don't think, anyway, I don't think you
Mm.
want, 110, was it, people working?
110. Yep.
100, you don't want 110 mini yous, right? You
No.
want everybody to be their unique selves,
Yep.
and maybe do a couple of things that sort of on brand, and kind of your reputation level, but other than that, like,
Yeah.
do your thing that made you
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we're paid to do things and make decisions. No one says, "Boy, at 3:10, I'm going to send the dumbest email you've ever read."
Yeah.
People are aiming to do well, right? Right? And sometimes, yeah, something will happen, but then you deal with it and you learn from it.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that's an effective and powerful tool to be a successful leader or realtor or whatever it is, therapist, all of
Wow.
that.
Wow. Jeff King, thank you for being here on the show.
I have a couple of questions for
Yes,
you,
please go
if
for it. Yes, yes, for it.
if you don't mind. And
Turn the tables on me. Okay. Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed this, and looking forward to coming back. I'm just curious about a couple of things.
Yeah.
Um, if you could wave a magic wand about one thing in your life, what would you direct it at, Robert?
In my life personally, or the world, or I guess.
However,
If I could wave a magic wand in my life, what would I do?
yeah,
I think, God, it's money.
Money.
I
Yep. Understandable.
think, if, when people have enough, money doesn't solve all of your problems, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
but it does help to solve those problems. And I think that's one of the majority of the things that people are actually facing and struggling with in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm no different. I'm not driving a Rolls Royce. I'm not even renting
Mm-hmm.
one to make it look like I'm doing one,
All right.
doing it. But I think if I could have the amount of money that would probably make things easier, that I'd be able to open up more services, I'd be able to treat more people that maybe can't afford the certain rates, and maybe bring on more students, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Have my kids in the particular school. We just have my oldest. He's 5. He's in kindergarten, already
All right.
struggling with some elements of school. So like if we could, we could, as a teacher thing. But she's great. Anyway. I think
I
I think
can
that's a
totally
big
get it.
deal. I think that's a big deal. That yeah, if there's enough money in the bank, or in some investments that could make
Hmm.
things easier, that's a big thing that I would love to make sure I tie off.
Oh, I love that. One final one. What's the nicest thing that's ever been said to you?
What's the nicest thing that's ever been said to me? Probably can't remember it specifically, but I'm always really touched when people. So generally clients,
Mm-hmm.
when I work. So when I work, I work with my entire heart and soul, and same with all my clinicians that work for me, or work with me. It's 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 such an investment, and almost like a spiritual connection, if you will, in a moment, really helping somebody in the hardest time. And when they say thank you,
Mm.
that is, it goes, it's not, yeah, I mean, yes, it's a business and that's an important part of it, but it's not the only reason why we do this work. It's because we want lives to get better. And and I hear, hey, you were effective, and, I'm doing the thing that I couldn't do before, and like, it was really easy for me. Like I drove over the bridge without any problems, and I
Right.
like, ugh. So then that life is better, and then that one life impacts 10 more, 50 more lives, and it's an exponential thing. So I think
Hmm.
that's and I really appreciate that. Just knowing that, I'm making an impact in the world, and somebody, appreciates my being there with them in the world. That's a huge thing.
No, very good. Well, thank you for being you. That was an excellent answer.
Well, thank you for being you as well, and I like this. I might have to steal those questions, if that's okay with you. Borrow
I've got a
them.
few. I got a couple others if you want.
Okay.
All right. I'll give you two more. Then we'll
Okay.
we'll, we'll call it a show for now.
Sure.
Um, if you're writing the biography of your father,
Mm-hmm.
what's the last sentence?
Hmm. He was a great man.
Hmm. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. And then the final question: Do you miss it? And it is the first thing that comes into mind.
Yes, I do miss it.
Hmm.
The thing that came to my mind was music. I loved it. It was such a an incredible. I don't think it's playing on stage, and like I wrote my own music, and then I had, mostly it was my music, and occasionally it was some of the other band members, but
Hmm.
to have my music then played in front of people, and they, enjoying it, and then you've got the guitars and the bass player and the drums, and all comes together. It is such a powerful thing, and it's a little mini group, and
Yeah.
it was just like, it was next level. I couldn't, and I was scared. I had a lot of stage fright, and I even dissociated once during music. I was playing. We did the Railway Club in Vancouver, and I was playing, and like some of the greats have played there before. And
Right.
I remember playing, our second song, and I was so anxious. I started dissociating. I literally saw myself from above the ceiling, looking down at me playing the
Oh
guitar. It was the
wow.
weirdest experience. And I remember going, "Wow, that sounds really good." Like, hey, oh, that's pretty. Oh, hey, what happens if you stop playing? The music stops if you stop playing. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So then I came back into my, eyes, and I was playing, and I was like, it was the weirdest experience, but um, that was, something that I miss. I hope to get back into at some point in time.
Love it. That's and I'm sure you will.
Thank
Sure you
you.
will.
And Jeff, what's one final thing that you want to share with the our audience members? Obviously, I'll link in
Hmm.
GVR's website and all that in the show
Oh
notes.
yeah, yeah. It, it, it,
But yeah,
the big thing is, uh, you're not on your own. If you're having troubles, reach out. If you see someone you think is having troubles, reach out to them. An open heart, an open mind can accomplish an awful lot. And that's be the main message that I
oh,
would give out.
thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for sharing everything that you've shared. You've been transparent, you've been open, you've been compassionate, you've been knowledgeable. Thank you, thank you, thank you for everything that you've done here. I think, I hope that if you've gotten value out of this show, please share this with as many people as you can. Not
Absolutely.
just because that helps the show see other people, but you could save a life. Somebody might hear this message and it might be the thing that they need to hear so that they can, keep going and they can reach out for help. So thank you for being here, Jeff. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Robert, and I'll be happy to be on anytime.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
And
having
for
me.
you
Yeah.
tuning in, I'll see you in the next episode.